Hello, welcome to the Turret of Pleasure in the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione once again. My name is Zipgun. I'm your host. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom. And unlike last episode, I'm not fighting a head cold. Instead, I'm fighting a flu. It is the season here at the Enchanted Kingdom. And just flying my Hinkle 111 here around the south coast of England, watching some time-lapse photography, hanging out with the Emperor. And it's time again. Boy, I'm getting a few of these now, and they're a delight because, well, I'm an unabashed sucker for punishment. So we're going to have another installment in I Am That Sucker. And it delights me to have one of these with reference to one of my favorite artists of all time, Mr. Sun Ra. And Sun Ra made a lot of records, many of which he put out on his own label, many of which didn't come with so much as covers. Often they would make the covers themselves. He was very, very, very DIY. A lot of people sort of knee-jerk Sun Ra as being unlistenably avant-garde and weird and hopelessly strange and blah, 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 which isn't actually the case. Sun Ra was very much steeped in traditional jazz. One of his first jobs was working as a arranger for Fletcher Henderson, and he developed his philosophies about space and blackness and many things. Many of which are, like so many genius musicians, are very impenetrable to a mind like my own. If you've read John Zwed's great book, Space is the Place, which is still probably the definitive biography on Mr. Ra, there are large sections of it that are tough to plow through because I just don't know what he's talking about. But his example did lead to him having a group of disciples that would do his beck and call musically, and he ran a very tight ship and created decades of great music, which, when analyzed with a certain amount of, if you ignore all the weird trappings and space stuff and just listen to it as jazz, is mostly really great. Fantastic. Some fabulous players played with him throughout his career. John Gilmore, Pat Patrick, Marshall Allen, Ronnie Boykins. A lot of guys stuck with him for a long time. Started in Chicago, moved to New York City in about 1960, moved to Philadelphia in about 1971-ish, 2-ish. And it is that last period that we're dealing with today, because in the goings-on of the last weekend, I found myself in what might well be my favorite record store anywhere, which was a place called Fascinating Rhythm in Nanaimo, BC. And boy, I like this record store. Steve, the fellow that runs it, is a really good guy, very knowledgeable, and he stocks his store like a true curator. I have little tests in my mind as to what constitutes a good record store, and a really good rule of thumb is if there's anything in the Ornette Coleman section or the Duke Ellington section or various other sections, and it's probably pretty good. And this particular visit, I noticed that in his blues section, in the Buddy Guy section, not only did he have a used copy of Stone Crazy, which might well be my favorite blues guitar record of all time, he also had a used copy of Sweet Tea, which is maybe my second favorite blues guitar record of all time, and they were both used for well under $10. So this is a great record store if you're looking for stuff that isn't run-of-the-mill. I'm constantly discovering stuff I had no idea existed, like I did this time. And this time I found 3 things that qualify for this particular thing. I'm going to start with the one that isn't really so much I Am That Suckerish, because I don't already have any of this. This is fairly new on Art Yard, who are very reliable. They put out a lot of good stuff. I think Recommended Records folks have something to do with this. Chris Cutler could probably write a book on his dealings with Sun Ra. Yeah, or Riri Megacore. Now this double CD set, which was a lot like $20, which is not terribly expensive for 2 CDs, and it features the subtitle, not on the front, but on the back, produced by John Sinclair, he of the Detroit, MC5 Stooges, that crowd. White Panthers? Anyway, he famously did time for a trumped up drug bust in the 70s. And he was one of the movers shakers of the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival for the few years that it operated. And Sun Ra was very popular with the Detroit rocker crowd. The MC5 thought he was great. The Stooges thought he was great. And so they made it a priority to get Mr. Ra and his orchestra to perform at the 1972 one. And it was such a success that they invited him back for the next 2 years. Now, this is a little bit disingenuous in that, and I'll note, people that get picky butts, Sun Ra and his Solar Myth Orchestra is Disc 1, 1972. Sun Ra and his Intergalactic Discipline Orchestra was 1973. And the 1974 was Sun Ra and his Intergalactic Orchestra. I guess there wasn't as much discipline in that one. Now, these are all, they're all very much of a piece. This is probably as good an example as you'll get of a typical, not a long set in Sun Ra's era, in the 72-75 era. So each of these is a single set, and it's probably, I don't know, well, they got 2 of them on one CD, so it's going to be 45-minute sets, I'm going to guess. Now, whether or not they've been edited, I don't think they have. And they are, if you're familiar with Sun Ra, you'll know that the sound quality of his records varies widely, to be very polite. And this is, as far as that goes, pretty good. I would say that they're like some of the Saturn records. The audio, you can hear everything. It's not super hi-fi, but it's like a really, really good bootleg. Now, this is a bit of a disappointment when you read in the notes, and you have to really read the notes carefully, because recording engineered by Jimmy Douglas and produced by Jimmy Douglas, Michael Kaskuna, and Tunk Aram, whoever that is. Now, this was recorded on 16-track multi-track back in 1972, which was still pretty new. However, it also mentions here digitally transferred from original stereo master reference tapes and edited by somebody or other. Now, I'm not sure whether these are original stereo master mixes of the 16-track mixes, or if they are safety masters that would be run at the same time for whatever reason. They don't go into great detail here. It doesn't say here. Now, somewhere in the notes, the original 16-track masters are presumed to have been destroyed in a warehouse fire. Although several segments of the orchestra's performance were mixed and edited by Alton Abram and myself to produce a track called Life is Splendid for release on the Atlantic double LP compilation of music from the 1972 festival released in 1973, which was actually a release and that came out. So it seems that they did not have access to those masters, and they are instead of using stereo master reference tapes. The sound on the first one isn't bad. It's okay. It's not great. The second one and the third one, and this is where you got to really read these notes right. Where's the thing? These are both taken from, it'll say somewhere, it's in very small print, so I have to look here. digitally transferred from the original 7-inch Stereo Master reference tapes. Now, the reason I don't think these are necessarily mixed from the 16 tracks is there's a note in here about the third concert where the fellow who showed up to record it wasn't paid and quite rightly, according to John Sinclair here, withheld the tapes. So I think these were safety masters that were run at the same time from the board. And that's what they sound like. So that's what I think it is, although it's not real clear, which, it's a Sun Ra record. Nothing is real clear. Now, the good news is there's, I think they do, 2C in almost all of these. Oh, they do it twice. Anything on here, and there are 3 of them, that is titled Untitled Improvisation, the 3 of them, is basically code for a delightful Sun Ra synth freakout and basically complete jazz freakouts. On the 1974 one, he has added a guitar player, a guy named Dale Williams, who you'll hear more about. And in the Untitled Improvisation on disc 2, first track, Dale Williams does a really great, I call it his Pete Cozy imitation, but it's a lot like Pete Cozy, kind of a great guitar thing. Wah-wah pedal, which you just don't find in Sun Ra records. There's very little guitar in Sun Ra records. So that's a real treat. And there's lots of chanting, of course. This was very much sort of Ra for the cheap seats, for the naive white audience, perhaps. There's a song here called Sun Ra and His Band from Outer Space, which has never occurred before in his discography that I know of, and also one called It Is Forbidden that I don't think makes an appearance anywhere else in the world. The universe sent me to... What? The universe sent me to converse with you, So you get the idea. $20. I think this is really good if you're a Ra nut. It covers a really nice area in the 70s when his band was consolidated, and it also covers the brief period of time between before he had a guitar player and after he acquired a guitar player. So I was really happy to buy that. I wasn't really a sucker for buying that, so no. What makes me a sucker is this has been re-released in a new, and again, the Art Yard folks are behind this. Now, this is his famous, or infamous, quote-unquote, fusion record. Now, this is a different record in many respects because it's a studio record, and it wasn't done at his usual studio, Variety, and it was done for an actual record label who was actually paying the tab. And that label was a label called Philly Jazz, which I have never heard of before, and I don't know how many records they put out, but by this point, Sun Ra had moved to Georgetown in Philadelphia, and what's his name? Tom Butcher, I think his name is. He inveigled upon Mr. Ra to do a record for him, and basically, after attending many rehearsals and getting absolutely nowhere, talking to Ra about the actual nuts and bolts of making this record, he finally just showed up and said, I got the studio booked for Saturday. Okay, we'll be there. So the band went up in the van. Butcher drove Ra. This is a little bit of an annoying package because it's all foil and it's hard to read. But it is pretty cool. Now, the reason I am that sucker is because, like most Ra aficionados, when this CD came out, this record was unbelievably rare forever and ever and ever. Like a copy of this, I don't even want to think what it would go for now. It's probably $1,000. But and of course it was out of print forever. They made whatever, 1,000, and that was it. And when the Evidence label did what is still, in my opinion, about the only worthwhile thing that label ever did, was they embarked on a gigantic program of reissuing Sun Ra's records. And they put out a humongous amount of the Saturn records, many of which had never been released in any kind of comprehensive format. And they put this out, and I bought it like everybody else and absolutely loved it. It's a little different. It's a little, I don't want to call it slick. There's 2 guitar players on it. One who's just simply called Disco Kid, and despite my best efforts, I can't figure out who this guy's real name is. I've found 4 different names for him. So there you go. Julian Presley, is on baritone sax. But we have Michael Ray on trumpet, he of Kool and the Gang, as well as Sun Ra's orchestra. John Gilmore, Marshall Allen, Lukman Ali on drums, Michael Anderson, Richard Williams on bass, Danny Thompson on bari sax, Art Katune, I can never pronounce this guy's name. He was with him for a while. So it's a bit of a hybrid band, but still some of the old crowd. And they did this whole record in one evening, and they did most of it just off the floor. Now this was done by a guy named Bob Blank in Blank Tapes. Bob Blank is famous in the sort of New York no wave scene. He did James Chance, he did Lydia Lunch, I think. He did some really cool stuff, and they were very good recordings. He's a good engineer. It wasn't a particularly expensive studio, I don't think. It wasn't very big, so cramming the orchestra in was apparently a bit of a challenge. But the sound of this record is as good as you'll get on a raw record, which is good. And he plays Hammond organ on this, which he doesn't get to play very much because I think the studio had one. And he had his Krumar and he had his Mini Moog. He had the whole full meal deal here. Now, so why did I buy it again? Well, because it's a 2-CD reissue. And this is ridiculous. Even though the original issue of this, and by the way, they did a great job because there's the original label right there. Yes, Philly Jazz. And then but it comes with an extra disc, which has no label. Strange. Why does it have no label? Asked Zip. Well, apparently they had started out with a different master of this record that, amongst other things, featured 4 extra minutes of music, mostly in the third track, That's How I Feel. 806 on the version that everybody knows, 1211 on this version. But apparently when they mastered it, they didn't like the stereo separation wasn't enough to suit them. And there were other things they didn't like about it. So they redid it, chopped out 4 minutes, and that's the version that got released. But, and this is so Sun Ra that it makes me laugh, they did make 100 or 200 copies of the original version, which they sold at, I think, a show they were sold at. The label copy had not been made available, so it just had a black label. And I don't even want to think what an original copy of that would go for nowadays. But they went and included it on this reissue. So basically, I spent about $30 for 4 extra minutes of music and an extra copy of this that I'm going to give to a friend of mine, of course, which is the happy thing about being that sucker. I'm not going to say a lot about this. There are other worlds they have not told you of. It's classic Sun Ra, dreamscape, chant, what have you. Lots of great weird synth noises. But there's not hardly anything weird on this record. It's mostly bumptious, kind of horn-driven jazz, big band jazz, if you will. It's a little bit loosey-goosey, like a lot of his stuff in the 70s was. The drummers all sound like they're half asleep. But an excellent record. If you don't feel like shelling out $30 for it, I really can't say as I blame you. But you might be able to find the original used in record stores cheap, and it's worth every nickel of that. But as Raw Records goes, this is a must-own. If you have 10 Sun Ra records, you want this one. Also in the I Am That Sucker department, and this is less so perhaps, but the first ever official reissue of the Saturn recording, I love this title, A Fireside Chat with Lucifer. Isn't that cute? Now, this is, again, original copies of this are as rare as hen's teeth. They're probably $1,000 or better. This was indeed recorded at Variety Studios, which was his favorite studio in New York City. They extended him credit. They also, I think, made records. And they extended him credit. They would do ridiculously small runs for him. They were his friends. They really liked him. And they would do all kinds of stuff they wouldn't do for anybody else. This band is very similar. Marshall Allen, John Gilmore, Danny Ray Thompson on bari, Walter Miller on trumpet. And this has Vincent Chauncey on French horn, who didn't play with the band for very long. They did this, and they did a thing called Taking a Chance at Chauncey. Tyrone Hill on trombone, James Jackson on bassoon, Samurai Celestial on drums. I wonder who that is. Now, this is, again, a solid 70s raw record. But, now you say, why am I, if I don't have this already, why am I that sucker? Well, this is really rare. This came out a few years back. And the LP version of this only came out on Y Records in Italy. The 12-inch of Nuclear War came out on Y in England and was, I don't know how successful it was. But this was a record that came about as a weird record deal he had in England that just kind of went sideways. But by the time the actual album was ready to come out, Y was pretty much bankrupt. And it only came out in Italy, of all places. And again, if you had an original copy of this, my God, put it in a safety deposit box. Now, the reason I am that sucker is because this has Nuclear War on it, and this has Nuclear War on it, which is the, well, at least on this record, it's the kind of centerpiece of this record. It was his anti-war song. He fancied that it would make an excellent disco single, and put the idea of this to Clive Davis, who pointed out that the word motherfucker appears in the song about 50 times and would make it unsuitable for airplay, and there they let the matter rest. But this is a good CD because it has Nuclear War, it has Sometimes I'm Happy, which is an old jazz standard, and Smile. They do a great version of Smile If Your Heart Is Aching. And it has a bunch of sort of, you know, again, like his 70s records, they're a little bit all over the map. Some of it's weird, some of it's very straight. I've had this for a few years. It wasn't cheap. This features Nuclear War and Retrospect, which is 2 of the 4 songs on it. So why did I buy it? Well, I bought it because it features a song called Makeup, which is actually kind of lounge jazz, if you can believe that. But the title track, A Fireside Chat with Lucifer, is a 20-minute long extravaganza, which I can't believe was ever actually written out. I think it was sort of maybe sketched out. And the band goes from strength to strength to strength through it, and it's, of course, it's as always fascinating. But this was, I think this was $18, and I said, of course I'm going to buy it. I'm that sucker. For the title track alone, it was worth every nickel. And this probably won't stay in print very long. So if you're at all inclined, what I hate about nowadays is when stuff gets reissued. By the time I find out about it, it's already out of print. So somebody told me that the avant-garde box set that I did last video is already out of print, which infuriates me. But there you go. I got it in time. And I'm waiting for another box set that I don't know where it is, and that's got me nervous because who knows? I've already paid for it, and it's coming from Italy, so who knows? But at any rate, yeah, so a lot of this stuff, strike while the iron is hot because it'll probably disappear. But there you have it. Fascinating rhythm. If you're into Nymo and you're into good records, go there. The staff are wonderful. They tolerate maniacs like me babbling on at top speed at them while they're trying to attend to customers, so they have a very long fuse. And I've known these guys for a long time, and good people. Not sure how long Steve's going to hack away at it, but he certainly deserves to retire because he's done it for so many years. And yeah, one of those things where I love going into a brick and mortar record store and finding stuff. Like I had no idea either. I had no idea any of these were out because I'm just not in the grapevine. So brick and mortar stores, they're still important. Support them. We've got Ditch here in Victoria. I go to Red Cat in Vancouver. Those are just 3 that I can tell you off in my little orbit here in the Pacific Northwest. But every town has one. Try to support them because, you know, someday they're going to disappear. And then we'll be stuck giving money to Elon Musk or somebody. Anyway, there you have it. That's this week's I Am That Sucker. There's going to be more. We'll just have to see how they all come out in the wash. So take care of each other. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll try to do more of these as I have stuff to talk about. In fact, I'm just about to go through my new box that I got that I'm not going to do a video on because I haven't listened to it yet, and I hate it when people do videos on stuff they haven't listened to. So I'm not going to do that. I will instead leave you and get back to you when I have. Take it easy. Thanks for watching. See you later.